Welcome to Your Best Life podcast, where we help you discover your calling so you can live with purpose and clarity. We're Pete and Julie Morrill, your guides, mentors, and lifelong adventurers, and we're here to help you find your true north. Let's get started. So, I'm here with Pete. We're Pete and Julie Morrill, and we're just going to talk to you about a few things about how we got started in coaching and guiding people in their life journey. So, Pete, I have a question for you.
Okay.
When is the first time you realized that you were a coach?
Okay, we would have to go back a long time. So maybe I was a senior in high school. I remember a senior in high school, one of my proudest accomplishments, you've heard about this one, is where I was ASB vice president and we decided to rewrite our Constitution. And we no longer had elections, but we had convention to elect people to be on our ASB president, vice president. And it became a big rally. And I had this one social science teacher that kind of challenged me and another guy. You guys should do this. And all he did was give us just like a seed of an idea, and it exploded. And for ASB in most schools is kind of a boring thing, right? But ours was really fun. We had this rally. It lasted 4 periods of the day. We convinced kids that if they signed up for a party, they could come to the convention, and then we could elect our president and vice president. And that we had an assassination attempt during that time. We had several different parties and negotiations amongst the parties. And I came away from it thinking that was just all an idea. And it was an idea that was kind of a crazy out of the box idea. And then we just kind of got people kind of excited about it. And I remember thinking, you know what? I think I'm pretty good at influencing people towards something that will be fun or make their life better or whatever. Nobody could give a rip about ASB prior to the year that we did that convention. And everybody would remember that convention that had anything to do with ASB because of it. And we probably, ASB in our school was, you had a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary. We had a whole cabinet, and then we had party leaders. We had probably, I want to say, a third of the school at this convention.
Wow.
And the way we sold it is you get out of 4 periods of class, and then it became really fun. We had speakers and caucuses and all kinds of stuff. And it was all because, honestly, if I was trying to not be humble, because I could influence people. The other guy was a good writer. He was my co-editor of the school paper, and he was much better at the writing side of things. And I was much better at kind of encouraging people, think about this. And then we got our party leaders, and once we got 3 or 4 party leaders, then they kind of made it a thing of their own. And we had a leadership class, and we kind of shared the idea with them, and then that. So I think coaching a lot of times is just helping people see potential, right? When you're coaching somebody personally, most of the time you're just helping them unearth the potential that they already have. We had some potential to make something that was kind of boring more than boring. But when we life coach, and I want you to comment on this in a second too, but when we life coach, we just simply help people unearth the potential that they already have. And then we help them make decisions based on the fact that they really believe they have that potential. Mm-hmm. A coach is just somebody that says, I know you can do this. Because then the reason they need to say that is because you don't believe you can do that.
Right.
Right? And then they're going to help you become better than you think you are because of their confidence in you. And that's one of the funniest things. Why don't you share a little bit about your coaching experience and maybe how that is?
Well, first of all, I want to say you were in a high school, a public high school, where they had leadership as a class.
Yeah.
I mean, where did that ever go? I mean, we don't have that.
Yeah, I don't
I've
know.
never heard of a class like
I
that.
don't know why they.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it was really fun. I mean, to be honest with you, the class could have been a lot more. It wasn't very structured. It was just all the leadership people working on the things that they did, but it did make the leadership of our school more
Yeah.
because we were given a whole period during the day to work on things. But what I would have loved to have them do is do what we do for people, is help them find their life calling,
Right.
right? It would have been, because here's the core of the high school, right? And these
The
are
leaders of the high school.
right. And most of the time they're leaders just simply because they're popular, right? That in most high schools, you're leaders because you're popular, you're an athlete or a cheerleader, or somebody that's kind of well known in drama or whatever, or they're super serious. We had some people that were super serious about student government, and we just decided to make it super fun. But wouldn't have been fun, both in high school or college,
Right.
that you just have a class that talked about becoming the leader that you already are.
And that maybe some leaders don't have the confidence to go forward with it until you have a mentor.
I'm pretty convinced that most people don't have personal confidence.
Right.
And the people that do have personal confidence, sometimes it's misdirected. I'm confident because I'm a great athlete or because I'm pretty, right? Which is, those are very
You're
temporal.
pretty.
um, I was a decent athlete in high school, but it's such a temporal thing,
Same
right?
with beauty.
Yes, same with beauty. And in that same vein, somebody could have been coaching and saying, I think you're an influencer,
Right.
or I think you're a writer, or I think you're a teacher. Um, and how much more that would have been a lasting gift rather than somebody saying, I think you're a good linebacker, that's a nice gift, right? It makes you popular and you get to enjoy that sport. But so rarely do we coach our young people in terms of who is the essence of who they are.
Looking beyond the surface.
It's really a shame. Yeah. Yeah. And helping them see and identify and recognize. And it's usually the athletic coaches or the drama coaches or the people that have a little bit more extracurricular time with that person that has the big influence, right? Because they've at least recognized you're a good athlete, or you were good at your flag team, and somebody kind of said, I think you should be a leader, right? And that surprised you, I think,
Very
at the
much.
time, and then you rallied to it, right?
I would never have thought of being a leader on my own because I'm not a natural leader, but
but
somebody saw some potential in me.
right, yeah. But isn't it a shame that nobody said, I think you're a teacher, or
Oh,
I
well,
think
somebody
you're a
did, but yes.
writer, right? But
But
somebody in those
right.
early years says, I think you have the raw ingredients to become. And we've gone through this kind of program with young people, with high school kids, and it's good. They're not as thirsty for it as
college
college
students.
or even post-college
Right.
people would be. But it's still good because it's kind of,
They'll look back on it, hopefully.
they'll remember, oh yeah, that personality test that I took, or that kind of life story that I said I would be kind of good at this, right? Yeah, yeah. I remember taking aptitude tests in school, and I think that's about the only thing that they do that said, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to help you try. But aptitude is just such a small sliver of who you are.
Yeah, one thing is because I'm a teacher, I was always looking for I think I just hit my microphone. I was always looking for the potential in people, and I think that's what I naturally do is I see it and I say, "Oh, you're really good at this." I might steer them toward a certain career possibly. So I was more career focused, but it applied to other things in life because wouldn't you say that your calling doesn't have to be career related? It can be voluntary, it can
Yeah.
be a combination of your career and voluntary. It can be all kinds of
For the
things.
ideal scenario is it's part of your career and it's part of your passion and it's part of,
For the
so
lucky people.
it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to divide it all, right? And I've been in a situation where it is my passion and my calling is part of my career. And I've been in a situation where it's not. And I think it hasn't made that much difference other than you can spend more time on it, you know?
Right.
Um, so
More
anyway,
about that another time,
yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Now ask me the question again. So, what is the first time I realized that I was a coach?
yeah,
Um, so definitely in teaching, I noticed that I was coaching, but I didn't really look at it as my calling. It didn't click yet. And then again, you were the camp director at Kidder Creek, and a lot of staff counselors would come through
mhm,
our house, and we'd end up coaching them without really realizing it. It was informal, but
right.
they just would ask questions, and you end up asking more questions about them. And it was coaching, but I, again, didn't make that connection.
Hmm.
I just knew, wow, I just am really fulfilled by this, but I don't know what that was. That was really
Mm,
cool.
yeah,
It wasn't until you and I were in the Yucatan Peninsula in the
mm.
jungle at night after uh, zip lining into a cenote and going through a ring of
Through
fire.
Ring of Fire,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
Which makes it
making,
sound like
yeah,
we were more, we were risking life and limb, which we really weren't. But
right, right. It was just super cool.
yeah,
And then we're groping through this cave in the dark, and we make it out. And then there's this little campfire in the darkness. We're all soaking wet. And it was actually cold, even though
it had
it's
turned
hot
cold just
there.
because the sun had gone
Yeah.
down. Yeah,
It was cold at night. So we're huddled around this campfire, and there were all these other strangers from all over the world. And I just randomly was, well, first I was listening into their conversations. I could tell what countries they were from, and that was fun. But then they started saying, well, after this is my last night here. I have to get back to life, and I don't really know what my life is supposed to be. And I went, wait a second. I can ask these people some questions.
yeah,
We spent about an hour. I spent about an hour asking them deep questions about their life purpose.
yeah,
And I think there were about 6 people,
yeah,
including, not including you and me. And then they all left saying, I think I know what I'm supposed to do in life after this. Thank you so much. I actually know what I'm called to do. I know what I was born to do. And I was like, this is blowing my mind. This
yeah.
is what I was born to do,
That's
is
right.
helping you figure out what you're born to do. That's when it all clicked for me. I was like, I'm doing this for
Yeah,
the rest of my life. There's
yeah.
nothing more meaningful or fulfilling to me. It's
And then
just,
you took a class, and then
yep,
you got
got
4 or
certified.
5 of your friends who would
Yeah,
just let you coach.
practice on them.
Yeah, well, they didn't let you. I mean, they said, "Yeah, I would like
Yeah,
you to life coach me," and you life coached
it's
them.
true.
And I remember you would go upstairs to do your little life coaching thing, and you would come downstairs walking about 2 feet above the level
Yeah,
of the ground because you were
I
so
was on a
excited
high.
about coaching them. Yeah,
And that wasn't like hard life coaching, but it was still edifying to me to help them just take one step to get unstuck.
yeah,
Because we could talk about their life purpose way out here. That's what we know you're supposed to do. But they couldn't get past the small things of, my house is cluttered. I just need to clean it up. Can
yeah,
you help me get coach through that? And that, honestly, strange as it is, cleaning your house was the
yeah.
number one thing I helped people in coaching, which,
Because discipline is
yeah.
contagious. Like if you get disciplined about your eating habits, you're more disciplined about your financial, and you're more disciplined about your
Mm,
living habits. And that's one of the things about coaching is when you help people realize, okay, this is small, but this is an important brick.
mhm.
And if you don't do this brick, some of the other bricks are going to be much more difficult. We do a lot of dog training, and it's all
You do a lot of dog
yeah.
training.
So it's all about laying bricks that are
Yeah,
very simple. But by the time you're done with a very advanced dog, it's unbelievable
yeah.
what that dog can do. Way more than most people think that the dogs can do. And it's because you've just laid the bricks systematically. And I think coaching is a lot like that, life
Mm.
coaching. And so if you're, in the military, they say making your bed first thing is first thing. In other words, if you're disciplined in how your bed is made, and believe me, if you've ever been in the military, they make you, this quarter needs to bounce off of this bed. But their idea is we're taking some people who, young men. This is the most
And
undisciplined.
women, but
Yeah, for the most part,
yeah.
young men, but there are women in there now. But for the most part, the most undisciplined part of
Right.
our population, right? And you put them all together, that could be chaos. But instead, it becomes because they're going to say to them, you got to be disciplined in the basics. And I think with coaching, what we do is we kind of help people see one, there's discipline, but it's discipline that's focused, it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, their life can be way more intentional than they think it can be. But they've got to be convinced of who they are and what their life calling is.
Yeah, well, what was interesting, first I would help people figure out their calling and they'd say, okay, let's make steps for that. And they just were stuck. And I'd ask them, what's one thing that you just really want to change in your life that you think would help you get unstuck? And almost always it was clean my house. Strange, but
Yeah,
true.
right.
So what was amazing is week after week, they would just clean a little section of their house each week. They started, for some reason, it freed their mind.
Yeah,
It was like, now I can actually think more clearly, and I know I can now fulfill my calling because I cleaned my house.
interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that?
And I do think we all have, it may not be a dirty house. Mine is a messy office, but we all have certain things where if you start there, and what I like about it is one is you're starting with something that's very tangible, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to live life differently now.
Well, also though, as coaches, we are encouraging people, and I think I have a gift of encouragement anyway. So we're just every week saying, "You can do this."
Yeah.
I've seen how you've been doing it. You just cleaned your house for the last 2 weeks. You're on a roll.
And the reality is too, when you have a coach, it's not you can do this. It's the coach is going to ask me how it went,
You're right.
on Wednesday
Accountability.
at
Yeah.
4 o'clock or whatever. And
Mhm.
so I better make some
Yeah.
progress here
Even if it's last
because
minute.
I told them this was one of the most important things that I
Yes.
wanted to see done, right?
Exactly.
And one of the things that we ask is, well, do you have the time in your schedule to accomplish that? And most everybody has to admit that the
They
time
do.
is there. Yeah,
Yeah.
the time is there. It's really not a lack of time. It's sometimes a lack of focus,
Mhm.
right? We all can get focused on a million different things. And I think that's part of life coaching too, is we kind of want to help people start saying, okay, I want you to focus on these things who
Mhm.
are the most, you have determined are the most important
Mhm.
things of who you are. It's the essence of who you are. Now let's start leveraging the essence rather than doing, in some ways, what everybody else wants you to do.
Mhm.
Your employer wants you to do certain things, your pastor wants you to do certain things, and all of those things get kind of put into a washing machine and it all looks the same.
Feels overwhelming.
Yeah, and we don't think it should all look the same. We think all of those other things should be good or should be probably given some attention. But let's realize that these things need to get the most attention. The things of your calling need to get the most
Mhm.
attention. And if they do, you become a lot more fulfilled. And all of a sudden, some of those other things, maybe I could get somebody else to do those things.
Mhm.
Or look, somebody else did do
As
those
in pay
things.
those
Yeah,
those people, yeah.
yeah. Or maybe those things, watching TV for
Mhm.
an hour and a half, or whatever, isn't as important as I thought it was because I'm not as bored as I used to be.
Right.
So yeah, so coaching really isn't as dramatic as people think it is,
Mhm.
but over time it will make a dramatic
Mhm.
difference.
Another thing I noticed, there's coaching seems more like a week to week, I'm keeping you accountable. But helping someone find their life calling is more of an epic moment. And one
Yeah,
of the things about that is you're helping someone realize the potential in them that nobody else maybe can see, but we as coaches and guides, mentors, I think we've been gifted with an ability to see people's potential. Part of that is not just immediate. We have to ask the right questions, draw it out of you, and it come I get aha moments. I'm like, I know what your calling is now, but
Yeah.
I have to hold it in because I have to wait for them to figure it out.
Well, and we also have a system, and the system says it over and over
Yes,
again. It confirms it and it refines it, right? So part of our system is that unique story, and that gives us a lot of background.
it does.
But maybe somebody's only 16 years old, so they don't have that much there. So then we're going to rely more on their personality and their skills and abilities, and what are the people around you say that you're really good at. But then you get somebody that's got a really unique story, and you can almost get their life calling just out of that unique story,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the other things confirm that. For me, that's my case. Is I have a fairly dominant, unique story where it says, "Wow, these are the things that were really fulfilling for me." And I look back at that
Mm-hmm.
and I said, look, they always involved leadership. They always involved the outdoors. They always involved adventure and they always involved teamwork. All right, maybe,
Mm-hmm. There's a
maybe
thread
those
there.
are some things that I should be looking for in my life calling. And, it just becomes, in some ways, it becomes so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's not obvious why people don't get it almost right away. In
I
other words,
didn't get it.
yeah,
For
most people
many
don't.
years, I was actually praying and begging God, please show me my life calling. I don't know what it is. Crazy, but it was there all the time and I was doing it. I just didn't figure it out. I didn't have that aha moment till I was in the Yucatan Peninsula and was like, oh, I get it now.
Well, and sometimes people kind of know their life calling, but they're making excuses why they can't do it.
True.
Well, I don't have time for that, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have the
Mm,
education, or whatever. And I would say that creativity says you unleash your life calling in small
hmm
ways at first.
Exactly. And that's where a coach comes in.
Right. And then we're going to it's gonna turn the ship.
Hmm
And yes, the ship cannot turn quickly, but when it turns and it's headed in the right direction, it can make a lot more progress than if it's going, we say, just a little bit off of the true north.
hmm
Then eventually you're way off true north. And yet just those little corrections. And I remember a couple we gave permission. They had a fairly loose job description,
mm
and we gave them permission to start saying no to
Right.
things that, and that's the biggest frustration they had is they felt like everybody around them wanted a yes to things that they weren't.
Mm.
And I said, well, what happens if you just say no? And the reason you say no is I don't feel like I'm very skilled in that area. So if somebody's asking you to say yes and you say no because you say, I'm going to do a lousy job, they should listen, right? Especially if they're your bosses. And I think in this case, it helped people redirect their job description.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, I think bosses don't realize it, but if you get people aligned with their skills, their passions, their abilities, their personality, you're getting them aligned in a way that you don't have to encourage them anymore. They're already
Yeah.
self-encouraged.
So this brings up another point that, again, you're a unique boss in that way. You were the head of a camp where you had hundreds of staff, where you actually gave them personality tests, you interviewed them and asked them what their skills were before you put them in their jobs and gave them job descriptions. Who does that? Hardly anybody does.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and most of the application processes doesn't delve into some of the things that
Yeah, who are you?
are the very motivation. We had a number of reasons for doing that. One is we wanted them to get to know each other really well. And so when they could share personality traits or they could share parts of their story, these were college kids. They were eager to get to know each other. They became a team much quicker.
Right.
Also, we wanted to know, okay, who is going to be that upfront person, and who's going to be the person that's really creative in the skits, and who's going to be the person that's very diligent with the record keeping or whatever. And to be honest with you, in the camping world, it's an experiment because a lot of college kids, they don't know themselves
Right.
that well. And so they're discovering, and that's really fun to help them discover. I know I helped a lot of kids discover that they were leaders by just giving them a few basic skills. A few. Sometimes it was the ability to communicate. What are the ideas? Sometimes it was the ability to organize and structure a team. Sometimes it was just the position. They already had the leadership ability, but you gave them the position, which gives them the right to say, I need to give some leadership here, right? And for me, that's what it was. Somebody one year I was a counselor, and at the end of the year they said, "We want you to come back and be our program director." And I thought,
That was in Mississippi.
yeah. And it was out of the blue, to be honest with you. I didn't even know, but that's what they do every year. I found out. And for me, it was like, wow, this person sees leadership in me, and so I'm going to live up to that. And it was probably one of the most fulfilling summers I ever had. But it was the summer that I really realized, oh, I'm a leader. I and then I looked back and I said, oh yeah, I led here, I led here, I led here, I led here. Oh, that makes me a leader, because sometimes you feel like you got to have a title. And they finally gave me a title, and then I look back. Oh, I was leading before when I didn't have a title. Sometimes when I had a title, and
Well,
sometimes
you
when I
were
wasn't.
vice president, so that was a title
Yes, in certain, but I
of high school.
think I led before I was vice president.
Yeah.
That's why I got the title of being vice president. Yeah, and even to this day, we joke about it because I started a pickleball club, and I was the president of the pickleball club, and even now I'm not in any official position. I'm kind of an official position, but now when we go play pickleball, everybody asks me, what are
They
we
think
supposed?
you're the leader, but you're not the leader
Well,
anymore.
but I
You're
am the
still a leader.
leader
Yeah.
because I'm leading that particular night's activities, or telling them when we have to stop or when we can start or whatever. So, yeah. But what I think people have to realize is, when you start leaning into who you are, people start um, feeling blessed by what you gave them. We just had a little pickleball scramble, and I think I told you when I came home, it almost went off without a hitch. And I remember 2 years ago, or maybe 2.5 years ago, when we put our first one on, we were just sweating it and going over. But this time, everybody knew their positions, and everybody knew exactly what was going on. And we worried about the things that we need to worry about. We didn't worry about the things. And I did say when I was driving home, that's because I'm a leader. Because I gave the group that gift of my leadership.
Right, that selfless gift.
And now the group is almost self-leading. I know it runs better when I'm there, but it doesn't need me to be there. And that's the sense of that gift, because the gift has been given to the group already. And it's going to continue to bless the group. We were planning on being gone this summer. We're not going to be, but I was setting things up so it would run fine without me.
Yeah. That's a good leader.
Yeah, I think it is. But it's also a good gift, right? A good gift isn't something that just blesses you for a second, right? We have somebody in your family that gives gifts, and we kind of look at the gift and say, "Oh, they were trying. They were trying." But it's not a gift that continues to bless, but it's not bad. It's just they
This
didn't.
person gives in many other ways.
Yes.
That's certain selfless gifts.
Right. Exactly would be the best way to say it. Yeah. Yeah.
that
You
are
were going to
more
say
in
something.
line with calling.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say gift giving is not the calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say is we're just talking with each other, but one thing that we do is actually coaching other people. And I can't wait to have people on our podcast that we're actually coaching so our
Mm.
listeners, our viewers can watch an actual coaching session in progress.
Yeah. I think that's when you'll start to learn how it works.
How it works for you.
Yeah. And I also think um, this is what I think about coaching in general is a good coach makes it simple and then starts to teach the nuances that make it
Mhm.
um, personal.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, our program fits just about
It's kind
anybody.
of a formula.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it would fit anybody from pretty much high school to well past retirement years,
Mhm.
right? And we could probably in 3 or 4 days tell you with some sort of precision what your life calling is. But then we're going to nuance it into what is your setting right now. Maybe you're a 70-year-old lady, or maybe you're a 17-year-old girl. Well, that takes a good bit of nuance. You might have exactly the same calling, but you're in a way different station in life. And so now we've got to coach you into how do you realize that calling at this station in life. And what does that calling mean? It means something different for a
Mhm.
17-year-old than it does for a 70-year-old. Um, but it's still the selfless gift, and that's really the essence of what we're trying to get people to is recognizing your calling is really how you bless those people around you, your environment. Maybe it's animals, maybe it's other, it's not always people, but you are blessing. You're
Mhm.
basically reflecting the gift that you've been given back to others or
Mhm.
your environment in a way that's significant.
Well, and that a lot of people ask, can your calling change? I think it can. It can. You have different seasons. My calling now is definitely not what it was at another season in life.
Yeah, for sure. And you think of a mom who is raising 5 kids like you did. um, you're going to have a different calling in your 30s than you do in your
Mhm.
60s,
Mhm.
or you're going to have a different calling in your 60s than you did in your 30s, for sure,
Mhm.
right? And perhaps that's why men, it's a little bit easier for them to progress career wise, right? Because they're just checking off these boxes, where women are going through more significant stages
Mhm.
in life that are a little bit different. And so it might be a little bit easier for men to maybe identify a calling, because it's not perhaps as seasonal as women. And a lot of times women will have much more relational
Mhm.
callings.
Mhm.
And when all is said and done, it's really the relational callings that make a difference in life, in my opinion. Men, I think, try to level the playing field, but women are those who are caring for things that are going to last, which is people. So,
I don't know. I can think of men and women who
yes,
do different things,
yeah,
so
for
it doesn't
sure.
always fit gender wise. But I think it is true that there are seasons, and that's where we've helped people who are transitioning from having a career all their lives to retiring. That's one of your heart passions is meeting with that age group and showing them that your life isn't over and it's not just about playtime and all me, me, me now. This is the best time for your selfless gifts to be given to others.
Which ends up being
More
such a blessing.
fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I would like to convince people is, first of all, we say that in your retirement years, you have more in your bank than you've ever had. What I mean by that is you have more time, talents, and treasures.
Mhm.
Theoretically, I know
Hopefully.
a lot of retirement people that this doesn't, but theoretically, you have more time, right? You should have more time. Now, a lot of them don't have more time because they're doing their calling, or
Hmm.
they're at
And
least
that's great.
involved in a
Yeah.
variety of different things. Uh, Secondly, you probably should have more in your bank account. Hopefully, by the time you're 65 or 70, there's enough in your bank account that you don't really have to work for a profession to be able to live. So your bank account is probably healthier than it's ever been.
And if it's not, go check out Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you probably have more talent than you've ever had. Now, people will overlook your talent, right? Because maybe you're not at the top of your game, or maybe you're not in the position. Like I'm not a camp director anymore,
Mhm.
so it's easy for me to say, okay, my leadership talent isn't as wanted or isn't as recognized, right? Because not
Mhm.
everybody at one time, people were checking in with me, daily and weekly
Right.
to make sure they were doing the right things. That doesn't happen in my world anymore. But it doesn't mean that I still am not a leader. I found that I'm a leader of culture more than I'm a leader of people now. In other
Mm.
words, I can look at a
Interesting.
church or I can look at a club and I can say, ooh, they could really help their
Mm.
culture by doing this. And so then my job is to kind of see how I can influence that, or if I can't, then go to somewhere else where
I was just
I
gonna
can have
say,
an
so
influence.
when you've changed a culture, you get bored. You need
Yeah,
you need a new challenge.
yeah, it's a little less exciting for me because I like the realization of change, and I unfortunately for me I see the change 2 to 3 years before anybody
Mm.
else does, or most people do, and so you have to have some um, social ability to read when it is right to move
Mm. Mhm.
towards that change that might be helpful for everybody. But anyway, that's a lot of what
Mm.
coaching is, and
Mhm.
probably why we enjoy
Yeah.
coaching so much.
It covers so much in so many age groups, and I think everybody can relate to this. Everybody,
Yeah,
to
some
some
people
degree,
like to call it guiding, and some people like to call it coaching.
or mentoring.
Yeah, and it's really all the same thing.
Mhm.
I think what our sweet spot is we want to get to the essence of who you are, and then we want you to start leveraging that
Yeah.
to change the world around you, to give it away. Um, but we're also willing to help, people that are struggling in their marriage, or people that are having challenges with their finances. We both have been in difficult circumstances there, and have not. I don't think have not come through those without some significant lessons learned.
Mhm.
So we love coaching there as well. I like coaching organizations,
Mhm.
um, because I think sometimes if you look from the outside of an organization, you can ask a lot of questions that you can't ask from the inside. And some of those questions are the vital questions, And
For example, there are pastors of churches that have come to you for coaching because you don't go to those churches.
right,
So they see you as a safe place.
yeah,
So that's an interesting one
yeah.
where you really have helped a lot of people.
Or businesses that are just
Yep.
kind of stuck, and they haven't looked at their business with fresh eyes, and
From the
sometimes,
outside. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but I think we most enjoy coaching the individual who really wants to give their life away, really wants to live within their strike zone, we call it.
Life with purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Life with calling.
Another thing, we won't cover it today, but this will be a great one for another episode, is to really talk about times in our lives when we weren't fulfilling our calling and we
Mm.
knew something was off, and it, just emotionally we were just dragged down, burnt out, until we steered the boat even a tiny bit toward our calling, and
Yeah.
makes the biggest difference.
Well, and this is one of the things I would encourage people with is you're probably never going to live your calling 24/7, right?
Good point.
You're not going to be able to live your calling if you're in your job or you're in a station in life all the time. So sometimes you just need to get 10% of your
Yeah.
life directed towards your calling. And then maybe next year you could get 12% or 15% of your life directed towards your calling. We're in a place right now where we're trying to steer pretty heavily towards our calling, but there's still responsibilities that we have that are holding us back. And there's still opportunities that we're yet to discover that our calling will bring. And this podcast is one of those kind of fishing episodes to determine okay, is this going to be a big part of our calling, or is this going to be a small part of our calling? So I think it's good for us to just kind of wrestle with that and realize we know who we are, we know what we're supposed to be doing. I think you and I are trying to realize where is the
Mhm.
arena
Mhm.
that we're going to be
Well,
most
we
active.
want to we know what our gifts are. We
Hmm.
want to give them away selflessly. And a podcast does right now seem like a good way to do that.
Yeah. Yep. And personal coaching,
Mhm.
and we hope to do retreats at some point. Um, and I think all of those will, and that's just what we envision today, and it
It could
could,
change.
yeah, it could change. Yeah. Well, good.
So, yeah, thanks. It was good to talk with you.
Yeah.
Always good to talk with me, too, I know. Thanks, you guys, for joining us today. We want to thank our sponsors. Today's episode of Your Best Life was brought to you by True North Quests, helping you discover your calling and live with purpose. Find out more at tnadventures.org. And by Marble Mountain Kennels, where exceptional Labrador retrievers are bred and trained for adventure, companionship, and service. Visit mmkennels.com to learn more. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, remember, your best life starts with knowing your true north.